This episode is brought to you by Global Comics. This is the comics reading app that is changing the face of independent comics. You can go to Global Comics and browse thousands of books from hundreds of publishers, including Dark Horse, Image, Dynamite, AWA, and even individual Kickstarter creators as well. Or you can purchase a monthly or even an annual pass and read all the comics you want for one low fee. For 33% off that annual pass, use the code GCXBJKicks at comicsaredope.com/global. That's comicsaredope.com/global. Well, guys, tonight's guest, I always say tonight, even though these episodes release at 6 a.m, but today I am joined by an esteemed comic writer who has been in the industry for decades at this point and has written on every character you can imagine, from the G.I. Joes to Superman and Spider-Man and Zod. Specifically, we're here tonight to talk about Jonny Quest, but we're going to talk about quite a few different things with the writer, Mr. Joe Casey. How are you today, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. We spoke a bit offline just a second ago, and I'll just tell you, I'm really excited about this conversation. This one's been in the works for a little while. I was on vacation when the initial promo run for Jonny Quest 1 was going, and so I kind of missed that train, and I was like, man, I hope I didn't miss my chance to talk to Joe Casey. And Amy's like, nah, I got you. So thankfully we are here.
That's right. They make it rain over at Dynamite.
They do. So maybe we'll start in a fun place, right? So you're doing this press run, or you've been on a press run of sorts. What's the one question you haven't been asked that maybe you're surprised you haven't been asked?
Oh man, I don't know. I think when it comes to Jonny Quest, I feel like I've been asked everything that could possibly be asked. I will say this: I'm usually the one that brings up the Kamiko series from the 80s, the comic book series from the 80s. No one's ever kind of flat out asked me, did you read that book? Which I did. Did you like that book? Which I did. But I'm always offering it up. So maybe I'm cutting them off before they get a chance to. But that's tended to be the question that I've been surprised that I haven't been flat out asked.
Right. I hear it's fairly rare. Like I'm born in the 90s, so it's rare that I would have seen it anyway. Yeah. But, my exposure to Jonny Quest, of course, comes from reruns on Cartoon Network of the original animated series. And funny story, I haven't admitted this to anyone except my comic shop owner. I tuned in to Jonny Quest back in those days because I thought Haji was black. Like, I saw a kid who looked fairly dark skinned, and I was like, oh snap, that kid looks like my friends. And so that's what initially got me glued into Jonny Quest whenever it would come on. And I don't know why. The guy's name is Haji Singh, but
like an early person of color in animation, though. I mean, he is a groundbreaker.
For sure. And then, I guess if we looked hard enough, we can find things that are problematic about everything. But I love that he's integral to the stories. Like, he's got ideas, he's got, plans, like, and he and Jonny pretty much are treated as equals in the show. So that was really cool. What was your exposure to Jonny Quest? Were you watching this like as it originally aired?
No, because it originally aired in 1964, and I was not even a glint in my father's eye then. But it was syndicated on Saturday morning cartoons fairly regularly in the late 70s, early 80s. It only ran for one season in its original run. So I feel like every 2 or 3 years, a different network would get the license for it and run it as part of their Saturday morning programming. So I've probably seen that first season over and over countless times just in the background of my childhood.
Yeah.
But I always loved it, and it always, I've said this before, but the best thing about Jonny Quest for me early on was that because of the art style, because of the Doug Wildey pedigree and the Alex Toth designs, it was the one cartoon, even in era of Super Friends and Batman cartoons and Spider-Man cartoons, Jonny Quest was the one that looked the most like a comic book to me. The art looked the most like comic book art. So that, coupled with a killer soundtrack, I mean, it's like Jonny Quest is like the ultimate comfort food for me as a kid.
Yeah, like, and maybe it's because I have kids, but I love just like comic books that can be read by kids and adults. And so the ones that really do speak to me are like the sort of action adventure. Like every issue feels a little bit different. Every story is a little bit different. Like Dynamite's got Space Ghost right now, another show with classic Alex Toth designs, right?
Yep.
Always very, very visually interesting, which is what I remember about Jonny Quest as well. I couldn't tell you the plot of like any of the episodes, but they always looked cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the same thing with Space Ghost. Like he just looked cool. You see him flying around in the white costume, and it's like that is awesome. I was just straightening up in here, and I've got an issue of Superman Lost, Christopher Priest miniseries just wrapped, and they put Superman in a white suit in that series, and just something about that is just visually striking. But anyway, all that to say, I love just the idea of like looking at Jonny Quest. Like it was always something that was visually interesting to me. When I was a kid watching those reruns, they put out another series. I think it was like The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest or something like that. But it was like they would do this like classic animation at some points and then this 3D animation, almost like they were in a video game at the end of every episode. And that was really fun.
I've heard about that series. I've never seen one episode of it. I don't even remember. It wasn't on my radar when it first aired, and I never saw it in reruns. I just missed it for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, that was after school entertainment. Like it would come on. There was this show called Reboot, which I later learned that Dan DiDio wrote on,
Yep.
and then there was The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest, and then once those two were over, that's when Dragon Ball Z came on, and so it was like, yes, Dragon Ball Z, that's the appointment view right there.
Yeah.
But my best friend, he was the one that was like, no, this Jonny Quest show is where it's at, though.
Right.
Anyway, so what I really want to know, though, is what your exposure to comics was. You said that Jonny Quest looked the most like a comic book, so it sounds like you were a big comic fan from the jump.
Yeah, I mean the jump out of the womb, I feel like I don't remember a time when comic books were not in my life to a huge degree. It's just one of those things where I probably connected with them when I was 5, 6 years old. And it was just like love at first sight. I understood what the medium was. There are still to this day people, adults who don't know how to read comics, for some reason. Where do I look first? How do I read which panel first and what order do I read the dialogue in? Well, when I was 5 years old, it was just intuitive. I got it. It spoke to me. And it's been, a pretty strong love affair ever since. So, I mean, I started off as a Marvel kid, became more of the independent boom of the 80s happened when I was a teenager. And then DC Comics basically stole all the American independent talent and put it on their book. So I followed them over to DC. So it's always been in my life. And, as you get older, time starts to compress. And at the time, it felt like forever from being like a teenage fan to a professional in the industry. Looking back now, 30 years later, it wasn't that long. It was kind of a few years and I was doing it professionally. So I was just very lucky that the thing that I loved the most was something that I was able to make a living at and really immerse myself in artistically and creatively. And I'm a lucky guy.
So that's interesting because I guess there's kind of two different ways, or there's a lot of different ways, but I feel like there's two schools of thought, right? There are some people who find a thing that they're passionate about creatively, but don't really conceive of an idea or they can't wrap their minds around like maybe I could do that thing. It's just something they end up just enjoying and it stays a hobby or whatever. And then there's somebody that's like, okay, I see this thing, I love this thing, I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to figure out how. Right? Like, where were you on that spectrum, and how did those wheels start to turn for you?
I was all the way to the extreme of I love this, I want to do this. How do I do this? What can I learn about this? It was not, it went quickly to my memory beyond the characters and the stories and the engagement of it as a entertainment medium. It was, I love this, I want to do this, I think I can do this. How do I learn how to do it better? And you know, I think my teenage years were spent educating myself on how to do it, you know, and I was luckily there was a great because of the rise of the direct market, there was a good market for fanzines like Comics Journal, Amazing Heroes, Comics Interview, Comic Scene, that was industry magazines that you know would tell you, not only give you the news, you know, what's coming up and the previews of things, but they would occasionally have these, you know, behind the scenes articles and look behind the curtain, and those were like gold whenever, you know, it would show up every 3-4 months in one of these things. And the interviews with the creators, I ate those up like, you know, I was a starving man in the desert. And you just slowly but surely sort of accumulate knowledge about, I think this is how they do it. And you're studying the form, you're studying different people that you admire and what you respond to, what you don't respond to. So I was probably about 15 when I started not only doing my own kind of low budget black and white comics, back when that was a thing, the small press started to become a thing. But I was sending stuff into Marvel and DC trying to get work. And I mean, I was delusional, but that was just on that path. And I just wanted to get there. I was in a hurry to get there. As it turns out, I got there exactly when I should have gotten there later in my 20s when I went pro. But from the time I was 14, 15, I was laser focused on doing it.
So you're 13, 14, 15, and you're eating up these interviews, right? Are there certain creators that you're looking out for? Like, who were the luminaries that you're like, oh, I'm chasing these guys?
Well, there were, I mean, in the 80s, when I was really conscious of it, there were the big names, Frank Miller, Alan Moore, I mean, titans of our industry. But for me, I was more drawn to guys like David Michelinie, Mike Barron was a big one for me. These were guys that were just in the trenches doing the job. They weren't superstars. They had some notoriety. They had some level of recognition, but they had their own voice. So, and that's all I was ever looking to be, was in the business, doing the job. It was never, I never saw myself as like the next anybody, you know. I just wanted to be in it, doing it. So those were my role models, the guys that were just in there month after month, and they seemed to have it was their job. They were doing multiple titles a month and just in there doing it. And it's funny that I spent, depending on how long it takes you to break in as a professional, that is your journey. Your whole life is about breaking in, breaking in, breaking in. Then you break in. Then your whole life becomes about staying in, staying in, staying in, which is its own mountain to climb. And looking back, it's funny, for all the study that I'd done, all the research that I'd done, all the trial by fire that I'd put myself through, I was less prepared for actually breaking in, succeeding to break in, than anything. I was prepared to fight to the death to make this. When it did happen, I was like, oh shit, I did it. Now what? That was as much of a head trip as anything else that I've ever experienced in my life, to be perfectly honest. But, you know, luckily I managed to hang in there for a while.
And so what was your first job? And then let's like maybe talk a little bit about like stringing together the next couple until you felt like, okay, I got the hang of this?
Well, I was following the path of a lot of my role models at that time in the mid 90s who were doing like independent black and white comics that were they weren't adult comics, they were mature comics. They were not for kids. And that's a lot of stuff I was reading at the time. So that's kind of the path I was taking. And as I was starting to make those kinds of comics, I was living in LA at the time. Well, still am, but I'd moved to LA. I'd met other people who were, mainstream comic book professionals, writers and artists. And just knowing them and being around them pulled back the curtain another level of like, well, this is what it's like to live your life and do this for a living. Became friends with a few of them. And most notably, very famous and very popular at the time, comic book writer named James Robinson, who people might know from Starman, The Golden Age, Leave It to Chance. He's up there for me. We got to know each other a little bit, and he basically held the door open for me at Marvel Comics. He was writing the Cable series for Marvel at that time. And when he decided to step off, he kind of ushered me in and introduced me to the editor and basically got me the gig, which I am eternally grateful to him. And once I got a foot in, even though it freaked me out to like, oh my God, I'm here now. The momentum that I'd built up over the previous 10, 12 years, I just pushed my way in and took as much work as I could. And luckily, when you first break in, you're basically cheap talent. So Marvel had no qualms about throwing all kinds of assignments at me because I was quick, I was cheap, and I think they felt like I had something to offer. So within a year, I was writing Cable regularly. I did a bunch of one-shots and annuals. I'd landed the Incredible Hulk series, and it just kind of steamrolled from there. So that was the start of it. But I felt like once I was in, my greatest strength was to just keep pushing and never look back and always feel like I was the first 3 years of being in the business, I treated still trying to break in. And I think that kept me motivated. That kept me, as a real sort of nose to the grindstone kind of existence. But it worked,
Yeah. So I feel like there's definitely something to say about like that relentlessness, and I think that's common of a lot of breaking into artistry careers, right? Like just the drive, the pursuit, and like kind of not taking no for an answer. Perseverance, that's the word. But there's also got to be like a point where you're like, all right, I'm proven, I've paid my dues, I've done all the things. What's that mindset shift like to go from, okay, I'm the fast, cheap talent to I'm actually doing really good work. I deserve to be paid, commensurately with that. And this is the type of stuff I'm going to go for.
Well, I will say this: it was never about money, although that got better as I went along. But it was more about agency. So I think the turning point for me was I spent 3 years roughly at Marvel Comics in the beginning of my career, writing all kinds of things. But the editorial climate was starting to feel a little it wasn't working for me after a while. This was a different era of Marvel Comics. It was under this was like 4 editor-in-chiefs ago. And at some point I was just I felt like the editorial climate at that time was not allowing me to do my best work. I was making too many compromises. We're dealing with too much bullshit, frankly, to want to continue that way. So I broadened my horizons. I got work at DC Comics, started doing things at Image Comics. And once I branched out away from my first love, which was Marvel, my first girlfriend, so to speak, once I dated a few other few other girls out there, I felt a lot more secure. I felt like, okay, I'm actually in the industry. I haven't just broken in at Marvel. I am in this business. And that, to me, that was around 2000, I would say 1999, 2000. That's where my mindset, to your point, that's where my mindset changed for the better, I think, because I felt more like a professional. I didn't feel like I had a lucky break and I was just coasting on that. I felt like I paid a few dues here and there. So that was the big perspective shift, I think.
Got you. And I mean, since then, you've written all sorts of stories, all different types of characters, all different genres and tones. It's funny. I read Jonny Quest because I was excited about Jonny Quest, and then I'm like, oh, Blood Squad 7. So I checked that out, and I'm like, this is completely different tone. These are completely different from each other, you know? What is it that you feel like you're bringing to stories? Or maybe, I don't know. The question probably is, what is it about the story that you feel needs to be told? And how do you do such varied types of stories?
Well, I mean, I reading different kinds of comics, not just superhero comics, but even within the superhero genre, there's all kinds of levels and different takes on the material. So that's one of the cool things about being in this business is you get to do different types of things. You're rarely pigeonholed unless you pigeonhole yourself, which I think I took great pains never to do. I feel like how I approach most things, when it's not just, I mean, in the case of Jonny Quest, they came to me, they offered me the gig. And then when I thought about it, I thought, do I have something to offer this property? Do I have a story I want to tell? When it comes to like Blood Squad 7, it's just, it's a kind of, I wanted to see that comic exist. I felt like there was room for it. There was a place for it. And to be in a position where I can make that happen, it's really, I really love that. I really love to be able to have an idea. Oh, there's not a book like this that exists out there. What do I think about that? Do I have an idea for that? Do I have a way to execute that? And if I do, the ability to actually make it happen that's really the culmination of being in this business for so long, is to on occasion, doesn't happen all the time, but on occasion be able to execute that idea, even if it's just a whim. There's a lot of things I've done in my career that started out as a whim. Wouldn't it be cool to do this? Or wouldn't it be interesting or fun or crazy to do this? And to be able to do it is extremely satisfying, very, very creatively fulfilling. And it's great to be able to, pay your bills and all that kind of stuff, doing what you love. But in the greater scheme of things, it's much more satisfying to feel like you can follow your creative muse and it can take you somewhere. It doesn't just spin around in your head forever. You can, bring life to these ideas. And, there's nothing beats that. Nothing beats that.
For sure. Something you said kind of brought this up in my head, but I talk to a lot of writers, and a lot of times when you're talking to writers and they're talking about story, it sort of comes down to the central idea of problem solving. It's almost like the general idea for a story you have, but to make it work almost feels like a math equation of some sort. And there's like this point where it's like, okay, the matrix has slowed down. I can move fluidly. I've got it. What is it like to be in that zone, to feel like you found the flow of a story?
I know what you mean. It's pretty great, actually, to be honest with you, when I think about it like that, because it's always happening. It's a constant churn of interlocking puzzle pieces. I mean, with Jonny Quest, I came up with the initial idea. What if we brought the 1964 cast into 2024? What would that be? Then, like you say, it's a series of problem solving. And as you do that, if you've done it long enough, as long as I have, it's like a muscle that's really, you've worked it out a lot. I've burned a lot of rocket fuel to get to a certain altitude, and now I'm sort of at that altitude, I'm burning less fuel.
Mhm.
I'm a more efficient thinker because I've been doing it so long. So it's always, no matter what, and it's on multiple projects too, and not just comics, where you're always rolling things around in your head. Can this element hook up with this element? Can this plot beat lead into this? Or how does this pay off? Because I set it up 2 issues ago. I just figured out how to pay it off. That's happening constantly.
Mhm.
And it might be the hallmark of an insane person, but it's my job to be able to live, my life managing all those ideas and all those problem solving efforts in my head. So when I explain it out loud, I realize I sound like somebody needs to be locked up. However, it's just like it is the job.
Mhm.
So it's all, and I love it. It's not a burden. Sometimes when something takes longer to get figured out than I would like it to, that can be frustrating, especially when you're on deadline.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I tend to set up my gigs enough in advance that I have that time to let that flow happen naturally.
Yeah.
And so it's great. I mean, it's a fun part of the job for me.
Yeah. And so we've been kind of dancing around it, but I told you offline I'd been really excited about Jonny Quest. And to be honest, there's not really a good reason for me to have been as excited as I was about this series. Like, I vaguely remember Jonny Quest just from seeing it on TV as a kid, right? Maybe it's just the character designs, but I remember enjoying Jonny Quest as a kid. And when I saw that Dynamite, well, first Dynamite got the Disney license last year or
Yeah.
2 years ago at this point. And so they've been pumping out like Darkwing Duck and all this stuff. And it's ironic because I had been dancing around like these very polite conversations with Dynamite, like, I don't really cover this type of content. The stuff that you guys do, there's not really a spot for it here. And then boom, they're the Disney guys.
Yeah.
So anyway, they got that stuff. And then the announcement comes, they got this Warner Brothers license. And just Jonny Quest is literally just like kind of a footnote, like, we're bringing this out and this out, and there'll be Jonny Quest later. And I'm like, Jonny Quest, that sounds amazing. So anyway, they did the free comic book day issue, and that cover by Chris Samnee got me. I was like, all right, whatever is in this book, I want it. So we got the free comic book day preview, and I gotta say, it set things up perfectly, like, just great. And then we get issue 1, which is kind of expounds on it.
Yeah.
And now we're 2 issues in. By the time this comes out, we're just a few days away from issue 3 coming out. And the basic idea is Jonny Quest and the whole Quest crew, if you will, get transported, like you said, from 1964 to 2024. And to me, that's interesting because it's like, as opposed to it being us, me being 33, trying to go back and figure out who this character is from way back in the day, it's like this character actually has to come and figure out how this world works in present day. And we're seeing how things have changed for him, for them. And we're also seeing how things were for them back then. And just that idea alone is interesting before we even get to the execution of the idea. But what was it about that idea that you were like, I want to see this?
Well, I mean, the series, the comic book series from the 1980s that Kamiko published, took those characters and transported them into the 80s, not in a time travel way. It just treated them as contemporary characters in the 1980s. So it was a modern of the moment book. But I feel like these characters are really their perfect version of them is the time they were created in 1964. And no comic book had ever dealt with it as in a sense, a period piece.
Mm.
But I didn't want to do a period piece. I wanted to do a modern story. But so this was sort of in my brain, those interlocking pieces was like, this was the way to solve that problem creatively, was to bring those characters from the 60s into modern day. And it was like, suddenly they had an instant backstory because they'd lived that whole time, or some of them had, some of them hadn't, you know. Certainly Johnny himself was still around in 2024 as they're kind of cavorting around with him as a 71-year-old man or whatever. But I thought it gave those characters some emotional resonance because they would get a chance to see where their lives had taken them to some degree, to one degree or another.
Yeah.
And that's always what I'm trying to do with anybody that, any characters that I write, whether it's my own that I create or a work for hire situation or existing franchise or IP, is you want to give the characters resonance and give them inner lives and some emotional depth maybe that they didn't have. Certainly the cartoon was sophisticated for its time, but it can only go so far because it's a formulaic show and it's a new adventure every week. This was going to be a continuing, story, chapter to chapter, very episodic. That gives you a lot of opportunity to go deeper with the characters, their relationships, their emotional connections to each other, which is what I wanted to explore. That was the one thing that I felt had not been done in this way with these characters. So that was kind of where I was coming from there.
Yeah, no, and it's really cool the way it's played out, at least over these 2 issues, plus the free comic book day preview. It's, well, all right, we're almost at issue 3, so mild spoilers for issue 1, right?
Yeah, sure.
We find out, we get transported to 2024, and we meet old man Jonny Quest, and basically old man Johnny is our guide to how life has gone for the last 60 years. Yep. And, meanwhile, the Quest crew, Race Band and Dr. Quest, Johnny, and, Haji and Bandit, they're all the crew, right? But these guys are learning, okay, one, what has happened to us, right? Some people find out their story already ended, and we got to figure out how at some point. Some people find out that, hey, we're still here somewhere. What happened to us? Their relationships have all changed. There are lots of things that are just different. It's not just, oh, we're displaced in time. It's like, yeah, we're displaced in time, but I don't know that we recognize this version of ourselves. Like if I had to say, what am I going to be like 50 years in the future? I wouldn't have guessed this. And so it's like that sort of emotional crux is there, and it just hooks you. Like, I'm just like, all right, I got to figure out what happened to these people. And by the end of issue 1, there's one person who we haven't seen a glimpse of their future self yet. And I remember being like, yo, where is that person? And I hope we see them in issue 2. And of course, we do see them in issue 2. And again, the state of things seems to have changed. And it's like even more like, okay, what happened out now? And so I am fully like enthralled by this. But what's it like creating a backstory and a forward story at the same time?
Well, I think there's, aside from the characterization aspect, which I just talked about, I felt like there would be a strong sense of, in the early 60s, aside from some of the things that we went through as a country, as a society, as people, there was still a lot of optimism about the future. There was going to be this space age future. That's where the sort of the Art Deco movement came from, and it was that imagining it's going to be great. We're going to be, it's going to be a Jetsons future for all of us. And I think Jonny Quest originally was, in a sense, very forward-looking, and those characters, in a sense, had one foot in that world already. Dr. Quest was inventing things like rocket belts and dragonfly airplanes that were pointing to that future. Well, now they've been confronted by that future, and it's not at all what they thought it would be. It was not at all what they were pointing towards. That I thought had a lot of story power. And so the conundrum for the characters is that here's a future that is not at all what they thought it would be. And to learn about the events that have transpired is a very dangerous proposition. Because that's then knowing about your future and what's going to happen. And as Dr. Quest says in the second issue, the longer that they're there, the more dangerous the more harm they could do. So I liked that problem. It's a science fiction trope, but that's part of what Jonny Quest is all about, is a globe hopping science fiction adventure series. So this is, I'd like to think that the story that we're telling is right in keeping with what this comic has always been, or what the story has always been, what the characters have always gone through. So I did have to figure out to some degree what did happen to the characters in the intervening 60 years. But I will say that I'm not going to make it a big story point other than some of the things that we've already seen. Like who's still around, who's not still around. Because I want the reader to be more with the characters that are displaced than having this God's eye overview of everything that's happening. I want it to feel like this is a comic that inexplicably was published in 1964, and that we just guessed correctly what the future was going to be. So I want the reader's sensibilities to be with the 1964 characters and not the 2024 setting. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. So one thing as I was reading these two issues, right, it does very much have a science fiction feel. And to me as a reader, science fiction can be sometimes intimidating. I imagine even more so for the writer, because I feel like the challenge with science fiction is it has to sound scientific enough for the fiction to allow you to escape, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like I can't even begin to think about like, okay, well, what types of time travel theories do we have to look up and understand, or do we just create our own rules and then go from there? What sorts of things were inspiring to you, or were you drawing from to say, all right, I want to explain things in this way?
I did a bit of research in things like quantum physics and time travel theories. Interestingly, theories and physical speculation that didn't even exist in 1964, which I found kind of interesting, that I was applying things that we speculate now, knowing what we know in the intervening 60 years about quantum physics and things like that, to the time travel aspect. So in a sense, what Dr. Quest has stumbled onto with this invention that he's come with, this quantum counter, which was basically designed to identify and count quantum particles, not to, engineer time travel. That's sort of an accident, as we've seen in the story. But I did a bit of research. I mean, the trick of these things is not for it to be realistic, but to sound realistic.
Right.
So it's a bit of a language dance. But that's another fun part of the job, is to pick out terminology and reformulate, theoretical things that you read about, so it's easily digestible, easily understood, and works for the momentum of the story.
Yeah.
You don't want people hung up on your, scientific jargon when you want them to be caught up in the momentum of the story.
For sure.
So there's a bit in issue 2 where they kind of take a look at the quantum counter, see how it works, see what needs to be repaired. There's a lot of gobbledygook in the dialogue there, but it sounds good. It sounds somewhat authentic, and you get the idea. Right. So I was satisfied on that level, I guess.
Yeah, no, it comes across. It works. It definitely
Oh,
works.
good. Good.
And so the other part of this, crux of this, that is like kind of fascinating to me as the reader is how the relationship between Johnny and race seems to have changed over the years. I can't be the only one because I've seen it referred to as a joke. Like there was some old show or Adult Swim cartoon where there's literally a paternity suit going on between Race Bannon and Dr. Quest. Because when I was a kid, I just knew Race Bannon was Johnny's dad. And I was mad when I found out he was like just the bodyguard. Like, no, that guy is cool. Those two are the most compatible. Why is he not the dad?
Yeah, right.
And so to see it go from that sort of two peas in a pod type thing as it was in the show to where it currently stands is like that is among the most interesting sort of sub threads that I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how that happened too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's no one's caught it yet. It's not a huge clue,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a bit in issue 2 where Race and old Johnny are talking, and because he calls him Roger, his real name,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and he's like, when did you start calling me Roger? And he says, when you told me to. And he's like, when was that? Well, when my number came up.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's really understood for some reason what that means when your number comes up. I mean, if you think about how old Johnny is, what happened to in world history, in American history, as Johnny was becoming a teenager and a late teen and early 20s, when your number comes up, that meant something in the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh,
Something very,
snap. Is that the
yeah,
military draft?
yes.
Wow. I didn't know
So
what it meant either when I read it.
yeah. So that's again, I didn't want to bog people down into those things because it's not really what the story's about. But I wanted to sprinkle in little Easter eggs of
Mm,
like, but it makes perfect sense given Johnny's age,
right.
and to go a step further now that enough issues are out and issue 3 is about to come out. The tension between Johnny and Haji, adult
Mm,
Johnny and adult Haji in issue 2 also has a lot to do with they were the same age. So you can imagine things that Johnny went through, Haji probably went through as well.
mm-hmm.
So when you just put that amount of thought to it, a whole thing opens up in your mind of like, holy shit, what happened to these guys? What did they go through? You know?
Right. Right.
And that's all you want to do in stories like this is just give readers enough of a trail of breadcrumbs that they could follow that, and I see it on your face almost. You're already kind of coming up with stuff in your own head.
Right.
I almost can't compete with that as a storyteller. I couldn't compete with anybody's own imagination, really.
Mm,
So I try to give enough to get your mind going. And from there, it's, everybody will have their own story they can tell in their heads. And that's the interactive part of comics that I love too.
that's amazing. Just just the way that last 3 minutes just unfolded in my head. um, so that's cool. Now, as you're explaining this, right, and even just kind of looking at the story on its face, this is something that can only happen in comics. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like if somebody's like, "Hey, we're gonna do a new Jonny Quest TV show. Let's set it in 2024," right? If you pitch those things, they'd be like, "Ah, nah, that's not the Johnny anyone remembers, and so we can't do that," right?
Yeah.
But this type of thing can exist as a comic, and like I said, I think that's what makes what I do so fun, because, well, for one, nobody around me reads comic books. Like even I go to the comic shop, there's like 5 people there max
Yeah.
at any given time, right? So being able to talk about comics online opens up this whole community, and we all get to sort of share in what's amazing about comics. And to me, that is the fact that so much of what's in comics can't exist anywhere else. And then you can read it at your own pace, get your own things out of it, and just move on to the next story. And it's fun. Um, with that in mind, right? Like, what keeps you coming back? Like, is it just that? Like, I can't necessarily just do this as a TV writer or writing the great American novel?
I just have always, like I said before, I've always just been attracted to the medium and its potential, and the best examples of it over the history of its existence are some of the best things I've ever experienced in life.
Yeah.
It's, Dark Knight Returns is more than a great Batman story to me. It's something deeper. There's more to it than that.
Mm.
And there's examples all throughout the history of the medium for me. So it just never loses its luster for me.
Right.
The possibilities are endless. It's been the most constant relationship I've ever had in my life that wasn't another human being,
Yeah.
It's just always been there. And, to your point, it's been really great in the past, 5-6 years to see this YouTube community of comic book spokesmen, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
come out and stake their ground and talk about this stuff, because it's taken the place of an aspect of our business that has been lost, which is the central hub of information where everybody can go to. I mean, it used to be the fanzines I grew up with, like Comics Journal, Amazing Heroes, those things. Then it was, you can argue its virtues or its detriments, but Wizard Magazine was sort of a central focus of the industry. Then there were certain websites in the early days of the internet that served that function. Things got really scattered when social media became a very personalized and individualistic outlet for people.
Right.
And you guys that are doing these YouTube channels are really bringing it back to a communal space where people can come and share ideas and feel like there's a place they can go.
Yeah.
So it's been great to see it. And I'm so grateful that you guys sort of picked up that baton and said, okay, we're going to be the guys now. We're going to be the guys that you can listen to and come to talk about this stuff, because we all want to talk about it,
Yeah.
and so now we've got places to talk about it. So it's great. So great.
Well, on behalf of everyone on you, I'm joking, but just on behalf of me, like, I thank you. It's been really, I don't know, this journey for me, and a lot of this is thanks in large part to the folks behind the scenes at Dynamite. But being able to have these conversations with the people that make comics possible, right? Like, it's legitimizing, it's validating in a way, but it's an honor. It's not something that I take lightly. And I know I'm in a group chat with a ton of comics YouTubers, and we all are just like, every day we're in awe that, okay, this is a small piece that I can contribute to the world, like whether anything ever comes back from it or not. And so I'm just grateful that it's appreciated. So thank you.
It's definitely appreciated. Definitely appreciated.
Man. And so speaking of just endless opportunities and possibilities, Jonny Quest, right? This series, I know some of these titles at Dynamite have been conceived of as limited runs, some are ongoing. How much runway do we have for Jonny Quest stories, to your knowledge?
Well, the first story arc is 5 issues.
Okay.
I'm just about to start writing the second story arc. I'm just kind of taking it arc to arc. They, if I jump off, they may continue the series without me, or not. You never know. This marketplace, you can't predict anything anymore, I found.
Yeah.
But our second story arc is locked, and it's going to be, I thought this story was big that we're telling right now. The next one is going to blow this out of the water, which is why I'm sticking around, is because I came up with this idea and I said, look, I'll stick around if we can do this. They said, all right, let's check. So they went to one of the Warner Brothers people and cleared the story, and we're off to the races now, man. It's, so it's only going to get bigger from here.
That is awesome to hear. I'm excited. As if I weren't excited enough.
And it's not just me. Sebastian is on for the next story arc. And, so we're psyched for doing this book together and what's coming up next. That's hopefully what we all hope is who do this for a living is that we want our enthusiasm to translate to the readers. If they can sense that we're excited about it, then they'll get excited about it. So for Sebastian and I, when I see his work on the page, I see the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I hope readers see both of our enthusiasm, because we're having the time of our life on this book.
For sure. I would be remiss if I didn't just hype up Sebastian's work on this book a little bit more. I don't know. Sometimes like comic art is so good, but it's like you just kind of expect it to be good. And so it's just there. But what I love about Sebastian's work on this title is that it does feel equal parts past and present. Like there are scenes that look super futuristic and have like a sort of edge to them. Like even just like sort of the future state character designs. It's like, that's really cool. And then you get these moments. There's a flashback villain in here. And it's like, when you see it, it's like, this looks like it is straight off the TV screen. Like just straight up. Somebody found an old Hanna-Barbera character sheet and here we are. And so I love that about it. And the colors add a lot to it as well. Honestly, the whole team is just knocking it out of the park on this book.
We did a bit in the second issue where it's basically a straight homage or a lift of the original title sequence of the show, where they're all in the cockpit, and they're introducing all the characters. And it's easy to say as a script writer, say, hey, here's the frame. We're gonna try to evoke this. It's an homage, obviously, but for Sebastian to execute it so perfectly was just like, oh well, this is great. And he gets better with each issue. Each subsequent issue is better than the previous, which is kind of it's as it should be. But you kind of feel like, oh man, if we'd have been able to sort of have a practice run and then start the series. But that's not how it works. And he's been great from the get-go, but I'm telling you, it gets better and better from here.
Man, well, I'm excited for it. So issue 3 of Jonny Quest is out from Dynamite Entertainment at your local comic shop this coming Wednesday. That would be October the 9th, if I remember correctly. I'm speaking kind of far into the future. Just know it's next Wednesday.
This is all time travel related,
Exactly. But yeah, definitely, if you have not pre-ordered the series, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go to your shop. They should have some copies of issues 1 and 2 left over. If not, who cares? Just jump in at issue 3, order the trade paperback. You'll get caught up later, so that you'll be down for this ride. Speaking of trade paperbacks, just before we recorded, I pre-ordered the trade paperback for Blood Squad 7, collecting the first 4 issues. I believe that is out November 12th. And I know we're running low on time, but for the listeners, what's the quick pitch for Blood Squad 7?
Blood Squad 7 is basically a retcon that takes a celebrity superhero team that existed in the early Image universe in the early 1990s and tells the story of what it's like to bring that team back in the present day. The backstory being all those comics that were published by Image in the early 90s, Spawn, Savage Dragon, Cyberforce, Shadowhawk. That's our backstory. We're basically filling the hole of Youngblood, which, because of unfortunate legal shenanigans, really doesn't exist in the Image universe anymore. There's a Youngblood-sized hole in the early Image universe. Blood Squad 7 is meant to fill that hole. So the series shows you how they existed back in the 90s, but also it's a modern day story. But the flashbacks are right out of the old comics, just replacing the Youngblood characters with the Blood Squad 7 characters. So in issue 2, for instance, there's a flashback to a famous scene in the early issue of Savage Dragon, where Savage Dragon fought a member of Youngblood for basically a whole issue. Well, in the flashback you see in our book, he's fighting a Blood Squad 7 member. So it's been a lot of fun. It's very, again, something you can only do in comics,
Yeah.
but we're having a blast. The artist Paul Fry is nailing it, and yeah, I hope people can pick it up. And it's been a lot of fun. And it's we've got in October, probably around the same time, or maybe more towards the end of the month, is Blood Squad 7 Strike File issue #1, which is basically our version of the old annuals, the oversized one shots that would appear every year.
Mm-hmm.
Our version is the Strike File issue. So Strike File #1 will be out in October, and then we'll pick it up again with issue 5 and beyond in December.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So there's time to get caught up. Again, the trade paperback collecting issues 1 through 4 is out November 12th. You can grab the Strike File, and then you're basically all caught up before the series resumes in December. So
that's it. Yeah.
Very great timing there. So, well, Joe, first of all, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and talk to the audience just about your career and all the things you're doing now. So thank you.
You're welcome, Brandon. It's been a lot of fun. It's good to talk to you.
It's good talking to you too. Real quick, for those who want to follow you and see what you're up to, where can they do so?
Well, I'm not a big social media guy, but I mean, my company, Man of Action Entertainment, has all the things: Twitter, Instagram, whatnot. So, or X, I guess we should call it now. So if you look for us, we're pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I will leave links to all of those in the show notes and in the description of this video. Once again, huge thanks to Dynamite, Amy, and the team for setting this up. Again, thank you to you, Joe, for your time, and to you, the audience. Thank you for listening. Go out, grab Jonny Quest. Go out, grab Blood Squad 7. There's a ton of titles that Joe is involved in right now that you need to go check out. So you can find his profile on League of Comic Geeks and catch up on all the stuff you missed out on. So I've given you your homework, your marching orders. I don't know what you're doing after you listen to this interview, but hopefully you're staying safe, staying awesome, and reading something dope today. Peace.